Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, money and politics reporter Kyle Mullins. Kyle, thanks for coming on.
Always great to be here, Brittany.
We are almost through this series, but to remind our viewers, your team is estimating the net worths of all the Supreme Court justices, and today we're talking about Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She was the most recent justice sworn in. So to kick off the conversation, can you give us a little bit about her backstory?
Absolutely. Ketanji Brown Jackson was actually born in Washington, D.C., but was raised in Miami, Florida, so she's a Floridian just like me. She was born, both of her parents were teachers, and they moved to Florida so her dad could go to law school at the University of Miami. And she credits him with her interest in law. She says she remembers doing homework at the kitchen table while her dad was doing, law school homework. So she went to a very good public high school and ended up going to Harvard University when she graduated. And she credits that to her speech and debate club. Her speech and debate was this very important thing that she was very active in high school. And she went on a tournament to Harvard, and that's when she was introduced to the school initially. And she also credits that with her interest in sort of writing, public speaking, argument, all these kinds of things that are really important for a lawyer.
So she went to Harvard, graduates, and now walk us through her law career before joining the Supreme Court in 2022.
Absolutely. So after she went to Harvard for undergrad, she did a stint as a reporter, actually, and then ended up going to Harvard for law school. She graduated after 3 years, a normal time frame, and she did 2 clerkships in New England, and that's not a shock because her boyfriend at the time, she'd met her boyfriend, who she described as a quintessential Boston Brahmin, a 6th-generation Harvard legacy. She met him at Harvard on undergrad. He was going to med school. So he went to Columbia for med school, then did his residency in Boston. So she bounced back and forth between New England and D.C. for the first couple of years. She did some private practice. She did another clerkship at the Supreme Court with Justice Stephen Breyer, the justice whose seat she would fill. And then she would, again, just kind of bounce back and forth, would try different private practice roles. She didn't really like private practice very much. She felt like the billable hour was really a drain on her and her family. So she bounced back and forth between that. She did a federal public defender role at one point. She was on the U.S. Sentencing Commission as one of their staff lawyers there. And then, that brings us up to the early 2000s when she was of counsel at a firm in D.C. Her and her new husband had moved down to D.C. He was a surgeon at Georgetown Medical Center. She was working as a lawyer, and that's where her federal career starts.
So from what you're saying, she bounced back between working in the public and private sector. Before we get to the number of what Forbes estimates she's worth today, do you have a sense of how much she was worth before joining the Supreme Court?
Yeah, so all judicial nominees have to file these statements of net worth with the Senate, and most of those records you can actually find going back to when they started their judicial career. So she was first nominated as a judge to become a judge by President Barack Obama, and she became a judge in 2013. Around that time, her net worth was around $700,000. Then she was nominated to get another promotion to a circuit court judge in 2021 by President Joe Biden. And around that time, she was worth about $1.7 million. And then less than a year later, she got the offer as a promotion to Supreme Court. And around that time, her net worth was about $1.8 million.
And so let's fast forward to the present day. Drum roll, please. How much is Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson worth now?
Forbes is estimating that Justice Jackson's worth about $2 million today. That is the lowest on the Supreme Court, tied with Brett Kavanaugh, who's also we're estimating about $2 million. But the difference between Jackson and Kavanaugh is Jackson has a book coming out soon, and we're expecting to see her net worth, or at least her income, and if she saves it, her net worth, shoot up in the coming year.
I want to talk about the future for her financially because it is looking bright. But before that, you have a really good pie chart in your reporting on her net worth, and it's divided into 3 things: her DC home, vacation home, and liquid assets. Can you talk about her real estate portfolio first?
Sure. So her current home, her and her husband bought right after she became a judge in 2013 or so. And that home, along with the rest of the DC real estate market, has done very, very well. Her equity's grown a lot. She's got about $1 million, around $1 million in equity in the home. It's worth about $2.4 million in total. We have to net out the mortgage. So she's got plenty of equity in a very large home in DC. And then she also, the other part of her real estate portfolio is a little more of a mystery. She declares a 20% share worth $400,000 of a vacation home, but we don't have any other details on that. I did find a report that suggested that this vacation home was in West Virginia, but other than that, this is kind of one example of one of the gaps in these disclosures. She doesn't have to disclose very many details about where this real estate, where this home is, how much did she buy it for, when did she buy it for, that kind of thing. None of these things are sort of public information. So as of right now, Forbes is keeping the estimate that she gave on her statement of net worth when she became a Supreme Court justice, which was 20% share, $400,000. Clearly, that means it's a pretty nice home if it's worth $2 million.
And let's talk about the rest of that pie chart. How much of her wealth is liquid?
About a third of her wealth is liquid. It's tied up in a combination of mutual funds and her husband's retirement accounts.
Kyle, I know you've explained this before, but can you tell our viewers again, how much does a Supreme Court justice make in a year?
They just got their salaries updated for 2024, actually. So her salary is $298,500 a year.
As you mentioned earlier, Kyle, Ketanji Brown Jackson's future is looking bright, at least financially. Can you talk about that book deal a little bit?
Absolutely. So book deals are common for Supreme Court justices. Sonia Sotomayor got very wealthy off of her book deals. Ketanji Brown Jackson reportedly signed a $3 million book deal the year that she joined the court, or just after she joined the court, which was in 2022. She was writing a memoir. It is scheduled to be out later this year, published by Penguin Random House. And like I said, it's reportedly a $3 million book deal, but none of it has showed up on her disclosures yet. So if I had to bet, I'd say that some of that income is going to show up in one form or another, either in terms of cash accounts or in terms of assets that she's bought on her next disclosure for 2023, which will be released in mid-2024.
And Ketanji Brown Jackson is one of the youngest Supreme Court justices, but in about a dozen or so years from now, she's going to have a nice pension to look forward to. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So she is, like you said, she's the second youngest justice on the court. Only Amy Coney Barrett is younger. Jackson has, a very generous pension. The Supreme Court has an extremely generous pension plan. So when she turns 65 in 2035, Justice Jackson will be eligible for basically to receive her annual salary for the rest of her life. Forbes estimates that at that time, that pension will, if she retired the day she turned 65, that pension would be worth over $3 million. Now, most justices don't retire when they turn 65. You can look at most of the justices on the court right now are well over that. But, we'll just have to see. We have no idea, when exactly she'll retire. But nonetheless, that's a pretty hefty asset that she'll have. Could be a fairly large impact on her net worth as soon as she turns 65.
Kyle Mullins, thank you so much for your reporting. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Always great to be here.